Most people discovered Katelynn Boren through a YouTube channel, but long before the cameras, before the recovery rigs, before millions of people knew her name, she was already out in the Utah desert doing something most adults wouldn't dare attempt. She was winning national rock crawling championships, cold calling sponsors at 14, and surviving a cliff crash so violent the footage went viral overnight. Matt's off-road recovery didn't create Katelynn Boren. It just introduced her to a bigger audience, because the real story, the one that actually explains who she is, started years earlier, and almost nobody knows it. Hurricane, Utah isn't exactly a household name. It's a small city tucked into the red rock landscape of Washington County, the kind of place where off-road culture isn't a weekend hobby. It's just part of the air. Cliffs, canyons, and ancient rock formations stretch out in every direction, and the people who grow up there tend to develop a relationship with the terrain that outsiders simply don't have. For the Boren family, that relationship ran deep. Katelynn's father, Kevin, discovered competitive rock crawling over 20 years ago and fell completely in love with the sport. For anyone unfamiliar, this isn't casual trail riding. Competitive rock crawling pits purpose-built vehicles against extreme terrain, sheer rock faces, near vertical drops, and tight gate courses, all against a 10-minute clock. Drivers are judged on precision and control, and a single mistake can end your run or flip your rig entirely. It demands nerves, technical skill, and a level of trust between driver and spotter that takes years to develop. Kevin was hooked from the start. He poured time, money, and energy into the sport, traveling across the country to compete. But rock crawling requires two people working in perfect sync, a driver and a spotter, and finding a reliable co-pilot proved harder than expected. So he eventually looked at his daughter and decided she might just be a natural fit. That decision would change both of their lives. But it started simply, with a kid, a Jeep, and a whole lot of Utah dirt. Katelynn started driving at age 11. Not on a quiet street or an empty parking lot, but out on actual trails, behind the wheel of a real off-road rig, learning how to read terrain before most kids her age had ever touched a steering wheel. Kevin would take her out, put her in the driver's seat, and let the landscape do the teaching. No formal instruction manual, no beginner's course, just dirt, rock faces, and a father coaching his daughter through obstacles that would make most grown adults nervous. The progression was gradual but deliberate. Over time, Kevin stepped back from driving entirely and moved into the spotter role, trusting Katelynn completely to pilot the rig while he directed from the ground. That kind of trust doesn't come from enthusiasm alone. It comes from watching someone repeatedly prove they can handle pressure, read a line, and make split-second decisions without panicking. She earned every bit of it. By the time she was 14, she already had years of real seat time behind her and was competing against full-grown adults on the rock circuit. The experience gap that should have worked against her simply didn't. She'd been doing this long enough that age stopped being the story. What mattered was what she could do behind the wheel, and that part was already well beyond her years. The competition circuit was about to find that out the hard way. The Boren father-daughter team needed a name, and Crazy K's fit perfectly. 2 Ks, 2 competitors, 1 rig. They entered the Better Rock circuit in Sportsman C class, running a Cherokee XJ, with Kevin on the ground as spotter and Katelynn behind the wheel. Better Rock, the World Extreme Rock Crawling Championship, isn't a recreational league. Teams travel from across the country, build purpose-built machines, and show up ready to perform at the highest level the sport offers. Walking onto that circuit as a teenage girl competing against seasoned adults wasn't a novelty act. It was a genuine challenge, and Katelynn treated it like one. The results came fast. In her early season at 14, she won 4 of her last 6 competitions outright and finished second in the other 2. Not in a junior category, not in a modified class designed to level the playing field. Against grown competitors who had been running these courses for years, the off-road community started paying attention, and so did the wider internet. Their Instagram account, @crazy_TS, built up over 52,000 followers Instagram, a genuine community of off-road fans who had been watching this kid compete long before any YouTube channel entered the picture. Crazy K's wasn't a brand built for social media. It was built on actual results, one competition at a time, and those results were starting to turn heads well beyond southern Utah. Then came the moment that put Crazy K's on a completely different map and nearly ended the whole story before it could go any further. During a competition, the rear end of the XJ dropped into a hole on an off-camber obstacle. The rig did a full rotation roll, then cartwheeled directly off a cliff edge, landing hard on the passenger rear roof with the cage collapsing on impact. Kevin was spotting from outside when it happened. There was nothing he could do but watch. Someone captured the whole thing on camera, and the footage went viral on Instagram almost immediately, spreading across the off-road community and well beyond it. Hundreds of thousands of people watched a teenage girl's Jeep cartwheel off a cliff in real time. Katelynn was 15 years old. She climbed out completely unharmed, and her first words once she'd confirmed she was okay were asking whether somebody had gotten it on video. Calm, unbothered, already thinking about the footage. That single moment told the off-road world everything it needed to know about what kind of competitor she was. The XJ was totaled beyond saving. Katelynn walked away without a scratch and came back with a brand new JHF/goat-built buggy, a more capable machine than anything they'd run before. The crash didn't derail her. If anything, it announced her. And she was just getting started. Rock crawling at the competitive level is an expensive sport. Purpose-built vehicles, replacement parts, entry fees, and cross-country travel costs add up fast. And they add up even faster when you're competing across multiple series events in different states every season. At some point, the math stops working without outside help. When their season wrapped up, Kevin sat Katelynn down and told her straight, if they wanted to continue competing the following year, they were going to need sponsors to make it financially possible. It was a practical conversation, not a motivational speech. The money simply wasn't there to keep going at that level without support. Most 14-year-olds would have nodded and assumed an adult would handle it. Katelynn picked up the phone herself. She reached out directly to companies, made her pitch, and landed notable sponsors including Maxxis Tires, Yukon Gear and Axle, and the Car Barn, building a legitimate sponsorship portfolio through nothing but her own hustle. No manager, no agent, no parent making calls on her behalf, just a teenager who understood what she needed and went after it. By 16, that list had grown considerably, expanding to include Warren Industries, Goat Built, Raceline Wheels, ORI Struts, JM Rigging, Burton Built, and more than a dozen other industry names. Plenty of adult competitors never build a package anywhere close to that. She had done it before most people her age had their first part-time job, and the sport hadn't even thrown its hardest moment at her yet. Coming back from a totaled rig and a viral crash would have been enough for most people. Build the new buggy, get back on course, and call it a comeback. Katelynn had different plans. She had been competing since age 13, and by 2022 she was ready to prove it at the highest level the sport offered. That year, she tied for first place at the W-Rock Grand Nationals in Farmington, New Mexico, the national championship, against the best competitors in the country. Not a regional event, not a local series, nationals, and she shared the top spot on the podium. By 16, she had stacked up victories alongside some genuinely tough weekends, but her attitude toward the difficult ones never changed. She described it simply, I've had a lot of victories and some not so good weekends, but I always love coming back and always learning something. That mindset, treating losses as data rather than damage, is what separates competitors who plateau from ones who keep climbing. For the 2023 season, she made the jump from sportsman class all the way up to the Pro Mod series, the top tier of competitive rock crawling. The girl who started in a stock class XJ as a young teenager was now lining up against the most experienced Pro Mod drivers in the circuit. She hadn't just recovered from the crash. She had used everything that came after it to reach a completely different level. And that's exactly when Matt Wetzel came into the picture. None of this happened in a vacuum. Matt Wetzel runs his operation out of Hurricane, Utah, the same small city where the Borens had been competing, training, and building their reputation for years. The off-road community in southern Utah is tight-knit, and the W-Rock circuit that Katelynn had been dominating wasn't some distant world separate from Matt's. It was practically in his backyard. Matt met Katelynn and her father Kevin directly through the rock crawling competitions they competed in. This wasn't a casting call, a social media DM, or a lucky discovery. It was two worlds that had been orbiting each other for years finally connecting, the way things tend to happen in small communities built around a shared passion. Matt knew the terrain, knew the circuit, and knew exactly what he was looking at when he saw what Katelynn could do behind the wheel. When she came aboard as an employee and on-screen presence at MORR, she didn't arrive as someone learning the ropes. She arrived as a nationally ranked competitor with a viral crash on her record, a sponsor portfolio she'd built herself, and years of high-pressure competition experience. The channel gave her a larger audience, but the foundation she stood on was entirely her own. That's the part the casual MORR viewer never sees. They watch Katelynn handle situations on screen and assume it comes naturally. It does, because she spent years out in the Utah desert making sure it would. Matt didn't build her into what she is, he just opened the door. What Katelynn Boren's story really reveals is something the YouTube world doesn't always get right. The difference between someone who was built for the camera and someone who was built for the work. Those two things can look identical on screen, but they couldn't be more different underneath. She didn't grow up dreaming about subscriber counts or viral moments. She grew up in the Utah desert, learning how to drive before she was old enough to do it legally, competing against adults twice her age, and handling setbacks that would have ended most people's involvement in the sport entirely. The sponsorships, the following, the national titles, none of it came from exposure. It came from showing up, putting in the hours, and refusing to treat a total Jeep or a tough weekend as a reason to quit. By the time MORR introduced her to millions of viewers, she had already lived through more genuine off-road experience than most people accumulate in a lifetime in the sport. The confidence viewers see on screen isn't performed. It's the product of years of quiet, unglamorous work done long before anyone was watching. That's what makes her story worth telling. Not the channel, not the fame, not the viral clip, but the foundation built underneath all of it. Because in a space full of personalities chasing an audience, Katelynn Boren built something real first, and the audience simply followed. If you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe. There's plenty more untold stories just like this one coming your way. Katelynn Boren didn't stumble into the off-road world through a YouTube channel. She was already deep inside it, competing at nationals, surviving crashes that went viral, and building a sponsorship network most adults never manage. Matt's off-road recovery gave her a platform, but the person standing on that platform was shaped entirely by everything that came before it. Years of early mornings, long drives, brutal competition, and hard lessons out in the Utah desert. That's the version of Katelynn most viewers never think about. But now you know, and honestly, it makes watching her on screen hit completely differently.